Ideas, questions, or comments? We'd like to hear from you at watchthis@email.com. That's watchthis@email.com. Welcome David Schimmel with his take on Billy Jack.
I'm itching to kill somebody, so it might just as well be you.
Before there was a Schwarzenegger or a Stallone, before there was a Jean-Claude Van Damme or a Steven Seagal, before there was a Chuck Norris or even a Bruce Lee, there was Billy Jack. Released in 1971, Billy Jack was a flop. However, re-released a few years later and distributed by Warner Brothers, Billy Jack was a smash hit, earning about 50 times its budget at the box office. Titanic, the biggest grossing film of all time, earned less than 10 times its budget at the box office. Now, my friends and I were pretty young at the time Billy Jack was re-released. I couldn't have been older than 10. And the more we heard about it, the more we wanted to see it. But our mothers heard about it too, and despite the equivalent to a PG rating, there was no way they were going to allow us to go. The film's reputation for violence and sex, and worse, a famous rape scene, was just too much for them. There was a bit of a compromise, though. See, Billy Jack made so much money after it was re-released that they decided to re-release The Born Losers, the 1967 film, which introduced the Billy Jack character in the first place. And while our parents had heard a lot about the sex and violence of Billy Jack, they hadn't heard much, if anything, about The Born Losers. So we got to see it, and as it turns out, The Born Losers was every bit as violent, if not more so, than Billy Jack, and it even sported its own rape scene. There were some pretty upset mothers. I'd tell you about it, but I'm saving it all up for therapy. For some of us who can remember, but we're a little too young to understand, Billy Jack epitomized the 1970s, its counterculture and its struggle against authority. And that's saying a lot, considering its low budget and non-existent special effects. Ironically, shooting for the film actually began in 1969, with its harsh social criticisms and counterculture born from the anti-war sentiments of the 1960s, not the 70s. But thanks to the oil embargo, the Watergate scandal, and Nixon's resignation, the film stayed relevant, even fresh, well into the decade. But don't be too quick to write this one off as a washed-up period piece out of date with today's audience. It's aged, yes, but some of its themes are as strong today as they were 40 years ago. The film's hero, Billy Jack, described as a war hero who hated the war, could just as easily be a returning Iraq veteran as an echo from the past. And its call for one law to be applied equally to all resonates with us today, as working families are being taxed to pay for the financial mistakes of billionaires. But I've got to warn you, all the social commentary aside, this one's an action film.
When Jean and the kids at the school tell me that I'm supposed to control my violent temper and be passive and nonviolent like they are, I try. I really try.
He fails. He fails miserably. Despite its PG rating, this film dishes out a lot of violence, and then after that, it serves up a lot more violence. It is somewhat softened by the low-budget fake blood, or is it just red paint? But that's not going to help you with a younger audience. Included in the carnage is a rather stark rape scene, which we are not showing you here, that has been alternately denounced as too realistic and applauded as sympathetic to the woman, including by none other than the legendary film critic Pauline Kael of The New Yorker, who commended it as the first to depict the aftermath of a rape on its victim. This movie is not for kids. I'd say add the entire Billy Jack collection to your rental list, but the only one in circulation right now is Billy Jack itself. Don't worry though, Billy Jack isn't so much a sequel to an earlier film as it is a second film based on the same character. You don't need to know what came before it or after it to enjoy the movie.